Faith in humans. Give me something to believe in. Earth below me, sky above me, fire within me. Brought to you by UPRN Network. I'm Trish Moe, and this is The Missing Piece. Good evening. It is June 6th, I guess. I don't even know what day it is. Monday, June 6th. I'm your host, Trish, and this is The Missing Piece. I am broadcasting live of New Orleans 5.3 FM and United Public Radio Network. I would also like to thank Carnation for sponsoring the first hour of my show. And it is such a pleasure, and I'm so excited to welcome Rachel Kleinsmith, known as the Swamp Witch, tonight. And there's so much. I don't even know where to start as far as all of your accomplishments, Rachel. You've done so much. But we will get into, she has an entire makeup line. I just lost your bio here, so I'll go over that. But an entire makeup line. You also, do you still do, I'll let you tell your story, but do you still have the original Facebook, YouTube channel? I don't know where I read that, that you had started.
The Swamp Witch page. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm sorry, okay, you're back now. You kind of cut out there for a second. Yes. I know you have the Swamp Witch page, but is that the original one? That it's the same one you've always had?
Yeah, it was originally named Depressed Swamp Witch because I was going through sort of a hard time a few years ago after my first makeup line. We got really big really fast, and we didn't have the infrastructure in place to support it, and I kind of had to shut it down, step back, and then work to get out of debt from that before I could start over. And I was going through a hard time, so I kind of made that because everyone always called me a swamp witch because I always have this wild hair, and I'm from New Orleans, and and I just started posting things that I felt were cathartic. Some of them were themed around New Orleans, some of them were like dark academia stuff, just relatable content, a lot of feminist type stuff. And it kind of ballooned as well. I thought no one's gonna like this content but me. I'm just posting it for me. And then we ended up with 220,000 followers. I think we're almost 230 now.
Wow.
Yeah. So whenever you think that you're the only person in the world that likes something, you're wrong. There's a lot of people who are into the exact same things and feel the exact same way that you do.
It's interesting you say that because that's actually intuitively what led me to your site was recently. I kind of did the same thing. I started 2 years ago. I started makeup line, well, kind of skincare makeup. And I had to shut it down and kind of recalibrate and everything. And then I went through this whole period with health problems with Lyme disease and everything. So I just recently started another YouTube channel telling that story, and how it can deal with like mental health and depression and ADHD and autism and stuff. So I didn't even realize when I ran across you again, being interviewed you were recently interviewed by Patty Negri, right? The Good Witch, who's been on here before. You were on her podcast.
Yes. And she's a very dear friend of mine and a client of mine. We work very closely together.
Yes, I love Pat. I had her. She was she was like my second or third guest on my own show a few months ago, and but yeah, that's where I ran across you again, and I'm like, hey, that's I used to see her, and I didn't even really, I have short memory here, so I didn't remember a long time ago that it was you. So I'm happy. I'm so happy you're here. Um, so let's get into first of all, Rachel has so many amazing things on her makeup line and website that that's something that there's so much there that most people don't even think about, like the health warnings and the products, or the, what am I trying to say? All the different chemicals and things, the ingredients that are in makeup. You disclose all of that. You also have a link for the pro accounts for artists, which you give a discount to. Um, but what was your inspiration for that specific? How did your makeup company get started?
Well, it's been a very long process. Um, my mom took me to the Clinique counter when I was like 13 years old and got me the whole skincare makeup line. I started wearing makeup religiously. And when I was in high school, I found the Gothic subculture, and that took me in a whole different direction with cosmetics. And simultaneously, I started selling Mary Kay, which I know I was too young to do. My mom had gotten an account with them to be a salesperson just so I could sell, you know, through her name, basically. And I loved learning more about that world. And somewhere along the lines, I discovered Paula Bagoon, the beauty cop, or the beauty. She wrote the beauty Bible, and what she basically did is she went through and she shredded the industry. She created this entire list of every ingredient that you can find in makeup and skincare, what it does, is it good for your skin, what amount is effective, what amount is harmful, all these different things. And she even had, I think at the time, don't go to the hair care counter without me, and don't go to the makeup counter without me. So she had a lot of information on like safety and efficacy, because the weird thing about cosmetics in America is it's largely unregulated.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of oversight. There's no pre-market testing required, and I think the FDA only bans um, like 13 ingredients, where in the European Union it's like 1,300. It's a lot of different things. And so, and it's funny, things that do ban are actually allowed in Europe. Like UV pigments in makeup is
Hmm.
disallowed in the United States. It's not. People do it anyway. And same with glitter. Glitter in eye makeup is not allowed by the FDA. But again, there's no real oversight. It's pretty much all on an honor system. And
There's
yeah,
so much glitter out there.
I know, right?
I'm like, what? um, well,
And that's
plus, I mean, you're in California. For people in other parts of the world, California actually does have, compared to all the other states, in most
yeah,
other areas like
yes,
agriculture and food and stuff, they have a lot more regulations on things like that than any other state.
right.
So in
And with
Canada, there's
that,
no regulation. I mean, that you could just, as long as you're not putting like, well, actually, there's just no regulation. You could probably put cyanide or there's those things in a lot of products out there. So, but there's no, for when I started my makeup or skincare business, there's nothing even for supplements, which is something you ingest. There's no oversight.
right. Well, to finish my story is that the more I got into that, the more I realized that I couldn't push the whole Mary Kay skincare line and makeup because I didn't agree with all of the ingredients. And the way that they do their sales program is that you kind of have to push the whole line exclusively. And it's kind of,
Oh.
and I loved Mary Kay as a person. I read her autobiography. I absolutely love the story behind it. It's brilliant, brilliant businesswoman, good woman. But they also weren't very accepting of me and my alternative look, and they kept wanting me to change. And so that combined with me not feeling comfortable promoting everything, I decided, okay, I'm going to start my own makeup line one day. And then when I was pregnant with my first son in 2011, I was like, okay, well, now's the time because I'm going to have a kid. I've got to do something, with my life that I can support myself long term, because I am very neurodivergent, like we were talking about with the Lyme disease and ADHD. I don't have Lyme, but my friend, a lot of my friends do, and it's a tough disease to deal with. But I am autistic and I am ADHD, and I've never been able to hold on like a regular job. I can work for myself
Hmm.
endless hours, but for some reason in a corporate regular world environment, I just don't cope very well. So I started my first makeup line in 2011. It grew very slowly because we were kind of coming from a place of poverty. And then
Hmm.
over the next 7 years, it started becoming profitable. And then in 2018, we went viral, and it blew up.
Um, now, how do you think, as far as, after the shutdown, I started seeing, which is one of the main problems with all of these newer companies since the shutdown. There were tons of like lip gloss. Lip gloss was a big one. That it seemed, I mean, there were kids like down the street, making lip gloss because they found a video or whatever online, and that's a huge as what I wanted to point out with it, there's a lot. I don't know if it happens with you, but um a lot of products have been linked to um, make things like autism or ADHD worse, as far as the heavy metals and the artificial colors. Did you experience that before you learned about um, the chemicals in the makeup? I mean, do you think that like red dye and yellow dye and all of that? Do you
Yeah, I mean,
think that?
I don't think there's a link to a cause. I think that a lot of things that can make that kind of thing worse for specific reasons. I don't want to say worse, but like the wording here is challenging. I Autism and ADHD are neurotypes. They are not,
Right.
you know, anything else. They're just different ways your brain processes. You can look at it on a brain scan, and we're born that way. We're born different, and there's nothing wrong with it at all. I'm a big advocate for autism acceptance and autistic pride, because most everyone I work with and know is autistic or ADHD or both, and it's very misunderstood, especially in the media. You have companies like Autism Speaks, which we consider to be a hate group. People put their kids in ABA training, which was created by the guy who created gay conversion therapy, and it's been linked to cause trauma in the long term in autistic children. It teaches masking, which is very harmful. Um, part of what comes with autism is sensory issues, right?
Yes.
So obviously, if you're in a setting or if you're eating certain foods that your body has a sensitivity to, because they're not, I'm not going to say the word natural, because natural doesn't mean anything, and not everything natural is good, like poison ivy, but like they're not your body and your history of your genealogy. Some people have, certain regions have more sensitivities to like lactose, except, or gluten. Like,
Right.
yeah, I'm celiac and I shouldn't eat gluten. So with my autism is that if I eat gluten, I have brain fog and I am more prone to meltdowns, because
Yes. That's how I am too.
I already shouldn't be having it. And I didn't know for a long time. My mom and grandma both were celiac, and I should have known, but they don't test early for that kind of thing. They basically don't diagnose you until you've already destroyed your intestines. Like they
Yeah.
don't care about sensitivity. And so the only reason I figured that out was from friends who have the same problems and elimination diet, and realizing, oh, I have more focus. Oh, I'm calmer. I have more, less mood swings. Like, and so there's definitely a cause, to why those things like dyes, like sucralose, gives you migraines. I can't drink any of the energy drinks on the market now because they all have sucralose. It's an instant migraine trigger. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, I think, yeah, it does affect your neurodivergency. It makes it harder to cope with the world that we're all,
Yes.
stuck in. But I don't think it's for the reason a lot of these people are saying. I think that's pseudoscience.
Yeah, I only know from personal experience. I'm, obviously not a doctor in that area, but um I cannot, when I worked in the corporate world and I would go out, even with food, but um I had my doctor said you need to quit drinking alcohol, and I was like, I don't drink. What are you talking about? And um it was from my makeup and hair care and skincare and everything else products, the aluminum. He's like, well, your deodorant, your everything that your skin
Right.
absorbs, and and that's when all my organs would, start shutting down and my immune system attack itself. So
Right. And
um
definitely. And they always do these tests on things they do test. They do it in very small, short term exposure with healthy
yeah.
people on top of that. So most scientists, you can't smoke, you can't be overweight, you can't, have any health problems to be in a medical study. So how is this stuff going to affect any of us who do have those things, going on? Like, we don't know because they don't test on it. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on, and especially in America where things are largely unregulated. Thank you, capitalism. Um, that are definitely affecting us. Like, they're saying we all have microplastics in our blood now. Like, it's
Yeah.
wild. So I've always been very careful. I've always been very interested in science and knowledge, and I know not everyone cares, but I will always put the information out there because it's important to me. And it's important to me that we use ingredients that are safe and tested, and be thorough about it.
I don't know if they still I don't allow my kids to get slime was the biggest one that when I first read the ingredients on slime, I'm like, I've been giving this to my child like when everybody was giving it to their kids like toddlers have it and there's horrible things in that. But as far as your makeup line is what was really amazing. And of course, all my favorite ones are sold out. So apparently they're everybody's favorite as well. But you have, I love the concept of it being a storybook and based on different themes of, are those, so you, Jane Austen, correct? Um, that's your one of your lines. And I want to say the Wuthering Heights and the Jane Eyre were my favorites, but of course, I think those were both sold out when I checked too. And then I love the Dracula one. But you also tell the history behind them. So where did that concept come from?
Well, I love history and I love literature, and again, back to that whole finding your people, even if you think it's really niche, like, they do show up. Like, I've always just created products that I want to see, and marketed them in a way that would appeal to me specifically. And that's how I find my audience. It is very niche, but it's very effective. There's a lot of people out there who love those books. They're very popular classic books, and while we might
Yes.
feel, you're kind of alone because not everyone around you reads or likes those, like, there's still millions of people who do, obviously, because they've sold millions of copies. So that's why I get into all that detail, because for people who it matters to, it matters to, and it matters to me. And yeah,
Yes,
the
and
book
I
were a
I'm sorry.
long process. Sorry, the book palettes were a long process to make. I have a patent pending on the design. No one else has done that. There are other companies that have done book themed palettes, but they don't actually open up like a real book. Mine has.
No, no, I've never that and that's what I mean. I absolutely love the concept. Like I could put these on, a shelf in my room or whatever, and it looks like a book. I love libraries. I love books, and so that's very appealing to me.
Yeah,
Because
I actually came from a meeting with the public library downtown Los Angeles. They're going to be carrying them in their gift shop.
what? That's awesome. That's amazing.
I love it.
That's
Yeah, we're in over 60 stores around the world now.
yes.
Uh,
That was my next question. Where people can find them, your
yeah,
products.
we sell almost exclusively wholesale to independent shops and also at conventions. We have a long list of events and trade shows that we're doing this year. We do sell on our website. We're kind of in between stock right now because we are doing back to back to back conventions. We just did Monster Palooza this weekend. We have HonX next weekend, and then Sinister Creature Con the following weekend. Then 3 weeks off. We're going to San Diego Comic Con and then doing Midsummer Scream, and so it's a lot. We also have a number of licensing deals in the works. I can't talk about all of them. I could probably mention a couple of them.
Yeah.
So and we also have a couple of meetings with large big box stores coming up next month. So we are looking at expanding into like the major retail category. Um, we also manufacture for other independent brands like Nikki Lipstick, Pinup Girl Clothing, and a few celebrities as well. So I don't just make my line, I also design products and then manufacture them for other brands. And
Wow.
yeah, we have a private lab that we work with for most of the powder, cosmetics, and packaging. And then all of our makeup brushes are made in house, like our tentacle brushes that are shaped like tentacles.
Oh, I love those too. And then you also have, aside from all of that, you have bags and accessories and my gosh, I looked through the whole the lip gloss that are I love that too in the wine bottles.
Yeah,
Um,
like liquid lipsticks. Those are officially licensed by Vampire Vineyards. So, and especially New Orleans, very relevant to New Orleans. They're carried at Boutique de Vampire in the French Quarter, and
oh,
they also carry the full-size wine bottles by Vampire Wine, and they're also served at the Vampire Cafe in the French Quarter and at Potions Lounge, their Vampire Speakeasy, which is above Fritz's jazz club. You have to go and tell them the vampire sent you to get in. Secret password to get into this secret speakeasy above Bourbon Street, and it's so cool. It's a vampire speakeasy. It looks like you're walking into the 1920s, and yeah, so they carry both our Dracula book palettes and our wine lipsticks, and they also carry the actual wine by Vampire Vineyard. So that's really cool. She actually just bought up the rest of them. That's why we're out of stock for the Dracula right now, because
yes, I saw that
they're all
too.
going to New Orleans.
That's another one that I was interested in. It was sold out as well. What now? So let's talk about the vampire community. You are editor in chief of the Vampire Magazine, but is that community, is that something that you have always been drawn to, or how did um, you kind of, connect with that community, I guess?
Absolutely. Well, when I found the Gothic subculture, and because I'm autistic, it became a special interest of mine. So I pretty much dove in as deep as I could into the history of the Gothic subculture. And somewhere along the lines, I discovered the vampire subculture. I'm not exactly sure where that began, but I was definitely sitting on vampires.com and vampireworld.com circa 2003 ish. And I actually found one of my good friends there, and I didn't meet him until 2017, but he is one half of the band Nox Arcana, which is a very famous dark ambient band, very good, big in the Gothic community. Joseph Vargo's the other half. He did a lot of Gothic artwork. They used to sell it in Hot Topic. They used to sell it in Spencer's back in the day. And yeah, I met him, and now he's like my best friend, after moving to
Oh,
California.
wow.
Funny thing is, I was in this time period. I also was shopping at Hot Topic, obviously, because we all were in the 2000s, small goths, And I was living
Shoot, I still am half the time.
I was living in Kansas at the time, and that was the only really option we had. To be in
Well,
Kansas, there
that's
was
why I still do it.
yeah, and I lived at the mall in high school. I was a total mall goth, total cringe. I don't care. It was an era, and
Yes.
Dark Realms magazine, put out by Joseph Vargo and Christine Philippak at the time, was in Hot Topic, and I picked up a copy. And there was an article there on Endless Night Vampire Ball in 2002 in New Orleans, and
Oh,
it's been
wow.
there since '95. Every Halloween weekend since '95, New Orleans Endless Night Vampire Ball is there. And when I moved to Los Angeles in 2015, a few months later, I noticed that Father Sebastian, who puts on the Endless Night Vampire Balls, was going to be at Bar Sinister. And I'm friends with um, Lisa, the manager there. And so we used to go out there and vend our makeup. We still do occasionally. In fact, the Vampire Magazine thing, Juliet Landau from Buffy the Vampire Slayer is our most recent cover model. And she's going to be doing a signing at Bar Sinister on the 25th this month. So I'm going to be back at Bar Sinister again. But I ended up meeting him there, and he's like, "Hey, you want to come out to my friend's 450th birthday party?" Because they just add, a zero to the end of their years. And I'm like, "Sure." So he took me to this Vampire Wine Lounge in Beverly Hills, which is actually owned by Michael Chat from Vampire Vineyards. They sold vampire wine there. So I
Oh,
kind of just got
wow.
thrust into this world that I'd been reading about since I was a teenager, and like kind of thrown into the inner circle by accident. And slowly over the last few years, I started working with Sebastian. We did a license with my first makeup line with his stuff, and it sold out. In fact, affiliation with that is what got me viral the first time. There was one of his customers had a fan page for Vampire the Masquerade in Mexico, and they shared the original mock-up of the tentacle brushes, and it went viral. So like it's all kind of tied together. But yeah, in the last few years, I do work for Father Sebastian. I run his online store and brand, and I work for Endless Night tangentially by working for him, and we co-own Vampire Magazine together. And I've always loved vampires. I think I was 6 years old when I first heard the story about Dracula, like the
Yeah.
actual person Dracula, like Vlad the Impaler. And I was just like hooked. My mom grew up down the street from Anne Rice in New Orleans. She was on the Irish Channel side, same street across Magazine Street. but she had always loved Anne Rice and always had the books at home, and she was an avid reader. She was a librarian, so I was exposed to that world at a very early age. And Queen of the Damned, I know it gets a lot of hate, but
Oh,
it came out, the movie, I mean, because it's not really based on it's based on two different books, but
right.
um it was perfect for me. I was 15 years old when it came out. I was listening to all those bands, like that was exactly what I was looking for, like at that moment. So it's always been a thing on my radar, and I'm very happy to be as involved as I am now, getting to talk and work with all these different vampire celebrities, people who are involved in the vampire world, pop culture, music, film, TV, everything. It's just great.
That's exactly how I was when I read all the Anne Rice books when I was little. I was obsessed. I mean, I watched over and over and over, because I we just had VCRs back in the 80s. And but The Lost Boys was one of them over and over. I watched all the really old, like the original Dracula movies even. Love those. And I was always um, so drawn to that. I actually, while you're talking, I had a huge deja vu. I must have had a dream about that very moment that I was interviewing you at some point months ago. But th- that's how I met Patty too. And we were talking about the vampires because I'm like, in Kansas. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with Kansas. But I've always been an outcast because there's not, I mean, aside from Hot Topic, people are like, oh, that's where the goths go, there's but there's not a lot of acceptance here of so when I learn about all of these things, even like you, or um anything, the magazine or the vampire ball, things like that, I feel like I've been living under a rock,
Yeah,
because these things exist.
um, yeah. I lived in Topeka 15 years. I felt very sheltered when I left.
Yeah.
I moved to Kansas City in 2010, and I moved to Los Angeles in 2015, and that's a culture shock. And I've traveled all over the country. I don't know how many times now, but it's weird how people there don't seem to think there's anything else out there.
Right.
Like, I've even heard them tell people, I'm trying to get them to leave. Come on, get out. Come on, move with me. Come out here. See the world. And they're like, well, there's just the same problems everywhere. No, there's not. No,
No, no.
there's not.
I have lived in the South. I moved back here from New York, actually. I grew up in New Mexico, and I haven't lived on the West Coast yet. But yes, every time I come back here, I'm like, there's like a whole other world outside of Kansas, that nobody realizes. But what I have experienced when you were in Topeka in Kansas City area, there is more paranormal
Oh, absolutely.
stuff here.
Crap.
But we don't think of it as paranormal because it just happens all the time and it's all around us.
Oh, I
And
think
so,
I mean, and it's weird. I've plenty of stories from New Orleans of paranormal things happening. I talked about some of them on Patty's podcast. I have so many more from Kansas. So many
oh,
more.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. In all the places I've lived, it's like here, and everybody does. Even if you go and talk to people who have never left the state and that you think are set in their ways and stuff, if you start talking about, as a medium, when I talk about that stuff, I'll be, talking to my sister about a ghost I saw or something in a bar out in public somewhere, and somebody next to us will be like, can I tell you something? And they'll
Yeah,
start telling their story that they've never told anyone. So it's so much more common, but everybody here just thinks it happens it happens all over the
it does happen.
place, like it's
Does
normal.
like there's I can definitely count on one hand the number of people I've met in Kansas who are just like, oh no, that stuff's fake. I've never experienced anything. Like, most
Yeah.
people have one story, one thing they can't explain. They can call it demons, they can call it whatever they want to call it because it's very Bible Belt.
Hmm.
But they at least have something. They at least have some. We used to go hang out. My comfort spot when I lived in Topeka was Topeka State Hospital before I tore it down. I used to go out there and just sit. And I have a really funny story from that one. I used to bring people out there too. And for some reason, every time we went out there, as soon as I looked away, they would see the shadow walking in a window up in the upper parts of the main building. And so I said, no, I'm not looking away this time. We're going to come back. I'm going to stare and stand there. So I'm standing there, like 20 feet from the building, just staring up at this window where everyone keeps seeing this thing walk by. And headlights. We see headlights on the wall, the brick wall in front of us. And we all turn. Most of us turn. I turned because I'm like, oh my God, there's a car going to hit us. There's headlights coming up right behind us, you know? It looks like it was like they're right there, like right there behind us. There's a car. There's no freaking car. There's no road.
Huh.
The parking lot's like 200 feet back. Like there's the road is like 1,000 feet. Like it's a football field away, because it's like
Right.
Summer Sports Park. You know, like
Yeah.
there's no street there. There's no cars there. There's nothing. And since I turn, the thing walks by. Like whatever. Still didn't see it. Um,
So I was it's funny you said, see, so when I moved back here, I didn't know about any of that in Topeka. And I try not to like research places before um I if I'm kind of drawn to something, because I don't want it my perception skewed. So I was actually at one of my son's football games at Hummersport Park in the or last fall, and I see this lady cleaning up this long trail of blood. Which, I mean, that wasn't the significance in that. The reason that was symbolic, I think it was from like a kid that had a bloody nose or something.
mm,
But right after that, I had just posted in a Topeka group if anyone knew any history, because that's the first one I'd heard about the Topeka State Hospital. And there are so many stories. People are
oh,
like, "Oh yeah, there's bodies underground there." And that's what the
unmarked
significance
grave.
of the
There is a graveyard, but there's also unmarked graves too. And it always had this really strange energy, like because it was a state hospital. It was a mental hospital, and people were not treated very well there.
no. It's
Um,
it's one of the most notorious for the horrendous things that were done there.
and yeah, it's wild. Rochester Cemetery. Have you been there?
I go there all the time. I love that
I
cemetery.
love it because it's a predictable haunting.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter
Yeah,
every
but
time I
everybody's
go there.
afraid of it, and I find
No,
peace at those places.
absolutely. Every single time I went there at night, not during the day, but at night, of course, we saw the albino woman every
Mhm.
single time at varying distance from ourselves, but it never failed. I could bring anybody there, be like, hey, come check this out. You know, you want to see this? And here's the whole story about the lady who she was an albino woman and she walked her dog late at night because, you know, she was shunned by society, and she still does. She's still there.
Yeah.
She's dead. And every time we went there, we saw her.
So I think though, as well for me anyways, when I see her, it has to do with my connection to being a witch as well. But um, she most people haven't publicized the true story about her, because she was like almost beaten and stuff numerous times and tortured and all kinds of stuff, as far well, she was bullied all the time, of course, because of the way she looked. And she wore, like you said, she went out at night because she couldn't be exposed to the sunlight as much, being an albino, so she would wear a lot of covering. um but she had that, it's not it's a skin, aside from albinoism, she had that condition where your veins, they're more like this, her skin was thinner, so they, how when blood oxidizes, or it's actually blue, but so when your skin's translucent, I guess that's what gave her the blue appearance. um
Okay.
but there's a whole story. I need to research that more sometime, because yeah, she was beat up a few times and like dragged and all kinds of stuff that people don't realize. They just say, oh, she's a scary witch and blah blah blah. No,
No,
she
I just
like
this is I mean, the internet wasn't quite as, I mean, it's been around for a long time, but I mean, this was just local stories I heard. I think I tried Googling it a couple times in like the early 2000s, didn't find much about it. So I really didn't have any source of information outside of just the rumors, but all I heard was that she was, you know, stayed away from people because they didn't understand her. I didn't know that that had happened. That's really horrible and
oh
sad.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the first story I got from everywhere in the internet and everywhere else, and when I right after I first saw her, because I didn't think, I'm like, oh, she's very peaceful to me, and we get along great, you know. So
Right.
but I started reading up on what really happened, and compared to all these horrendous, she's a monster and she curses people and all this. No, no, it was actually teenagers and all kinds of different people that bullied her. So um,
Tika is really, really bad about bullying. I
yes,
have a lot of
yes.
friends who have grown up there and left, and it's really, really, I can't emphasize enough, not like that everywhere. I went to Washburn Rural High School. It was like straight up Mean Girls the movie, and I was the same age as those girls when it came out. Like it's I, I tell people that in California, and they go, "No, it couldn't be that bad. It couldn't be that clicky." It was.
Oh.
It it really was.
I mean, my school wasn't like that. I went to a really small school though. Before, but then as soon as I got out of high school, I went to college. I went to Washburn one semester. I went to KU, and then I left. Like I left the state for years, and I didn't come back until a few years ago. But with my kids now, you know, they also have red hair, and my daughter's only 8, and she's bullied all the time for it, you know. And she said kids at her school call her a witch and call her ketchup head and all these things, and um, it is really bad, like, to where she doesn't even wanna go to school, and I'm like, "If this is happening when you're 8, you know, can you imagine in high school?"
It does get worse. It gets better. I mean, it gets worse and better. I was 8 when I moved to Kansas, and it was horrible. I had no problems in New Orleans and Louisiana, where I was, and I was an instant outcast there. And I also am a natural redhead. Um, and it wasn't about my hair. It was about me reading. They made fun of me
Mhm.
reading and liking books and being,
Yes.
and obviously for being autistic and not knowing it. Like, um, but yeah, like it was so brutal. Like it was so bad. It was so bad. I'd only stopped when I got into high school, became gothic and taller than everyone. I'm 6 foot tall, so
Oh,
I was
wow.
I was like
That's
five
awesome,
like,
though.
at like 14, and I could beat everybody up and they would leave me alone. Like like that was my defense, but it only stopped for that reason. I have other friends who did not, find a way to like protect themselves, and it continued through high school.
Yeah, I'm very much kind of an outcast here, so we're trying to move, I just haven't decided which. I think it's so expensive in California, though, nowadays, I don't.
But there's also more money and there's more social
It's
safety
true.
nets. There's practically universal health care. There's so much money for college. If like if, you have a daughter, she's 8. If she graduates high school in California, she gets free college for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, like, yeah, it's more expensive, but it's really also not. I moved back to Kansas for 9 months. Um, Family was having health problems, and I wanted to go out there for a little while, and we thought, okay, well, we're cutting our rent in half. Surely we can make money doing some of the same things that you can't. They can't. I can't afford to live anywhere but Los Angeles because it's what I do. What I do requires me to being here, and what you do would find you in good company here.
Well, and I think that's, you know, I've quote, well, I've probably misquoted this many times before, but there's a saying about the fish, you know, that spent all its life thinking um it wasn't like everybody else because it lived in a tree. You know, so, and I don't even know who originally said that or where it came
It's
from, but
attributed to Einstein. I'm not sure if that was actually him that said it, but it's often attributed to
he
Einstein.
was also, this is my little, I don't know if you can see my little, my
Yeah.
Einstein bobblehead. It sits on my desk. Yes. Y- yeah, so there's something to that effect of if a fish goes its entire life, um God, I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't even know what that.
And I
So
and I keep saying I'm gonna move back to New Orleans because it is home. I always feel at home there. I always go back. I'm there at least once a year, just twice a year. This year we are riding in the crew of Boo on October 22nd, so I'll be back there for that, and then for the next 2 weeks we'll be there
what
because of Endless Night New Orleans. But I
what
am staying in Los Angeles because it's where I'm working and making money, and I still intend to go home one day.
what is the crew of Boo for?
It is a parade like the Mardi Gras style parades, big floats, dancing, bands, the whole nine. But it's during Halloween time.
And so what month is you're also going to Romania, correct?
November, yeah.
November. Okay.
Yeah, we're going on a
That's what
tour.
I'm in the middle of a whole the passport department is I had to go through the whole getting a new birth certificate and everything since the shutdown, and it's it's a mess. I'm like, if I can get that before. Oh, that's what it was. She came on right before it was in April. So the original trip was scheduled in May, correct?
They did go in May. They
Oh, they
did
did
go in
go in
May,
May.
but there was a lot of people that wanted to wait, and so she split up the trip and did two trips. Uh,
Okay, that's what it was. And I'm
I'm
like,
Yeah, I'm going to the one in November because it's better for my schedule. It's going to be a little different itinerary, but still really cool. It's like 10 days, 9 nights, and we're going to explore all of the old monasteries, a lot of the haunted places, Dracula's castle, both the one from the movie and also his actual castle. And yeah, Patty's doing a whole like paranormal investigation at Parnari Castle, and it's going to be really cool.
oh my goodness, I want to go so bad. I'm like, that's why it was rescheduled, Patty. I'm like, there's a reason. So I couldn't get everything together in that amount by May anyways, not the beginning of May.
And the new variant of COVID, there were some people who just really wanted to wait, so they
Hmm.
just split the group in two.
Yeah, that's what I saw on that. And so is there a limit on how many people can go on that trip?
Yeah, the limit's around like 30 something people, I think, but we still have some tickets available, and it's honestly a really great deal. It's
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
$150 down payment, and then it's like 2,500 something for the whole trip, and it includes several meals, it includes transportation. Um, it's everything but airfare pretty much. Like your accommodations are included, like, and some meals you have to pay for yourself, but it's a really good deal. Like it really is.
You should come to Kansas in a few weeks
I wish
when
I could going to when Patty's gonna be there,
yeah.
but unfortunately I can't. um,
Oh,
I'm doing a convention right before that in Sacramento, and then I have a meeting with Walmart in Arkansas because they want to carry our king cake pallets next year in the southern states.
wow, that's
Potentially.
exciting. That's a major.
It's a meeting. There's nothing been decided yet, but we did get invited to come and meet with them in person.
They say Walmart's going to be the new Amazon too. So, more people are going to be shopping apparently. I just saw that last night, shopping there.
We sell on Walmart.com. We do sell on Amazon.com. It's just shipped from us. We're not using it for fulfillment centers. But yeah, we sold out of 600 of those king cake pallets at the beginning of the year during carnival season. Flirty Girl bought a whole bunch. They have like 6 different stores now, I think. But also Fifi Mahoney's in the French Quarter. There was an Ace Hardware in Mandeville,
I
Louisiana.
saw that.
Ace
I was
Hardware.
like, that's awesome.
Bought some king cake pallets, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, and I love it. I'm really happy people enjoyed them because I've been wanting to do that forever, and it was fun.
Yes, that's one that I loved as well. Uh, and I think that one I'm gonna have to go back on there because all the ones I looked at were. Um, do you have? What are your plans? Where do you plan on your businesses going in the future? I mean, I not your specific projects, but as far as expansion, I guess. As far as, do you plan on continuing, strictly in the makeup and um, that industry, or have you considered, I know you do your magazine. Have you considered writing books yourself?
I have, and actually have a list of books that I want to write, but that's just very time consuming. And right now, since we are
Uh-oh.
that, I just can't right now. So at some point I will. I actually had the idea because one of my kids really wants to get into witchy stuff. My 9-year-old Corbin, he actually read Patty's book and loved it. Writing a kid's book that's like not targeted towards little girls, like could be any gender or for little boys too, because all the kids' books around witchcraft are very gendered, and I feel like that's just
Yes.
a disadvantage for a lot of kids that are interested. Um,
Eh, well, and males throughout history, I have people that ask me that a lot of times anyways. I don't know if you can still hear me, but since your screen went black.
Sorry, I'm having connection issues right now.
You're okay. Have you heard of the Wilfrid Voynich manuscript? Oh,
You there? Are
yep.
you back?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard, well, maybe. Can you hear me? Okay, you're back. Sorry.
Okay.
Um, Wilfrid Voynich, have you heard of him?
I haven't.
So I came across this a few years ago initially, and then it keeps popping up, on TV, on random on the internet. You know how something will come across your radar, and then it keeps coming up. Well, then I saw a documentary when I was at work today that came up. He was in the 15. Nobody knows. They know it came from him. It's a book. They know that, but there's no title, there weren't any, they added page numbers later, but basically they're like, we don't know what this book is. It's a book. There's descriptions of all these botanicals, there's astrology, there's pictures of naked women going around the sun. And so I'm listening to these documentaries and I was like, okay, that's a grimoire. Like it's it was obvious to me,
Right?
but
Sounds like one.
right, and that's exactly how I would make a grimoire, how I do, or how most people, I know, because you go through different phases of curiosity and learning about different, your astrology and plants and animals and all of that, and then of course the phases of the moon and but I'm assuming because it was back, he was married. He left the book when he died. Obviously, his wife, he died when he was only 60 or something, but his wife kept it for years, and then various people tried to sell it, and could never sell it. And now, only recently has it become, now there's scientists and people now that these things are more accepted. There's people, spiritualists from all over, trying to interpret it, and he wrote in an interesting code language that nobody has been able to decipher. And but I'm assuming he did that in his time because he was a male. And even though throughout history, especially back in medieval times, wizards and such were more accepted. I assume he was taking the more what would have been considered feminine route back then. Um, and I mean, it's not that way now because we don't, as witches in our community, we don't distinguish it like
Right.
there's no
A witch is a witch. It's a not gendered
right.
term, you know?
But back then, I can see why he wouldn't, um, why he would come up with a code. And even his wife didn't know that much about it. Like she's like, I just write books and compose music, and but it's very interesting. I feel like you should look into it for some reason. Um,
Definitely will. It sounds very interesting. I want to learn more about it.
and it's huge too. It's got so many different sections, and so it's called the Voynich,
Okay.
Voynich.
The Voiding
Um,
Universe? I think I actually have heard of that.
Yeah, it's at the Smithsonian now, but they actually have a fully online digital copy for the most part. Um, but there's cryptoologists and I mean, so many people have tried to figure out what it means. But like I said, these people are all scientists. Even just seeing it first glance, through a perspective of witchcraft, I'm like, oh, well, I know what that is.
Right?
There's a um,
It's like the historians, they're talking about the two men that lived together and they must have been best friends, lived together for 30 years. Best friends.
I'm so glad all of that is more accepted now, obviously, because definitely um, been burned at the stake numerous times in
Oh,
past
same.
life.
I'm still a little worried about that. I travel across the country a lot. I travel a lot of rural areas. I'm still a little worried in some places in this country about being burned at the stake for sure.
Yes, it's sort of triggering. I think for those of us that do r- remember some of those past lives, that's a real thing. It's like a past life trauma that follows us, and which is sad because it's such a great community of um but the stigma is still there. Um
Some
I
places.
was well
Uh, In,
in
in Kansas, probably yes. In New Orleans, no, there really
right.
isn't. In California, it depends where you are. In Los Angeles, absolutely not. Most of the clubs we go to um, have some kind of ritual aspect to them. Like they actually do rituals like at midnight and in secret rooms, and like it's a kind of an open secret. Not to mention it's LA. There's Santeria and brujeria everywhere. Like you can see candles in every grocery store. The 7 day candles. You can see pictures of Santa Muerte everywhere. Like it's not really hidden here. And it's not really hidden in New Orleans. You can walk down anywhere in the French Quarter on the river and you can find altars set up with money that no one's touching because they don't dare, candles burning, no one messes with them. It's just accepted to be real by most people, whether they practice it or not. It's so it just really depends on where you are. Obviously places like Salem, it's pretty common, even now,
Right.
huge witch community in Salem, Massachusetts, um more than there ever was during the time of the Salem witch trials, you know so it really depends on where you are. Yeah, Kansas people are like, witch, scary, but like most places I think are being more accepting for sure.
I was going to tell you one of I don't think I've ever mentioned this on my show. I know I mentioned it on Chasing Prophecy because that's right around the time I found it. I looked up the definition for witch on just, Googled it. So in the Oxford, let's see, this one is from the Oxford Dictionary. This is the definition that they still have. A woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones,
Wow.
popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick.
Wow. The Oxford Dictionary.
Yeah. So that's not the only one. I went through all of these and I was like, you know what? Like how also a verb, cast an evil spell on. Isn't that nice? So that's my problem. Yes, there's the, Hobbit style flying on a broomstick thing. Okay, I get that. But for kids or somebody who's researching witchcraft or witches or reading up on it and they believe everything they see in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster back in the day, and then you see that. So that's a problem. And every other religion, every other practice, every other anything in the United States, especially, is protected by any type of um, what's the word? I lost the word. Yeah, and so the fact that witchcraft isn't included in any of that, especially around Halloween and stuff. And I get, the whole dressing up as witch, whatever that, but any other practice, whether spiritual, religious, whatever, um, it wouldn't be accepted to do the same, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah, no, that's disappointing. I did not know that about the dictionary definitions. That's really
oh,
disappointing. I do have
here's
I have a
oh,
funny story from Washburn High School in Kansas about
oh,
witchcraft.
I want to hear it. Just a second. So here's the exact Merriam-Webster version. A person, especially a woman, there you go again with the
Gender.
the gender, who is credited with having usually malignant supernatural powers.
Wow. Yeah,
I
I
think
feel
we
like
should we
start
should
a petition
create like
or
write
something.
to them and
Yeah, like sort of petition to get them to like
yes.
change it. That would probably go viral pretty quickly. It gets a lot of attention because I had no idea that
Their
that was.
second definition is a woman who is believed to practice usually black magic, often with the aid of the devil.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Holy crap. Yeah. So
Yes.
um I went to Washburn Rural from like 2002, one ish, somewhere in there, 2005. And I used to wear a lot of like band t-shirts that had like pentagrams on it, pentacles. They weren't even inverted, which not that it should matter if it is, but
Right.
they weren't. They weren't at all. And it was against the dress code to have anything depicting quote unquote Satanism or witchcraft. And so I kept getting in trouble and suspended and told to turn my shirts inside out because they had these things on it. And I was like, this is not okay. Like, this is religious discrimination. Like, you're not allowed to do that. If I can't have this on here, even though it's not what it is, like, it's still a religious symbol. Like, it's not why I'm wearing.
Right.
Like, they shouldn't be able to wear crosses and stars of Davids if I can't have this on here. So I
Exactly.
ended up carving a pentagram into my hand because they couldn't make me turn it around. And uh, yeah, that do not recommend. Do not try this at home. But it got a response. Not a good one. I got suspended for like 3 days, but they couldn't do anything about it. Like the scar took like, a couple weeks to heal. They couldn't stop me from going to school. So
Right.
kind of made a point. There was a particular security officer at the school that loved to harass us. His name was Officer Target. I recently learned he passed away, and I recently learned that he also had a lawsuit against him for like inappropriate behavior towards a student. He threatened to tase me one time just for asking a question. Like it was wild. He was on a total totalitarian trip, like security guard on steroids at a high school. Like
Wow.
yeah, so that was a fun experience, but I enjoyed them not being able to do anything about that little pentagram thing.
Have you been to Stoll?
I have long after the church was no longer there, of course, and we didn't get very close because they are very careful about arresting people who actually cross into the grounds. So we just kind of drove by slowly and looked over the fence.
Which is ironic because their website, I had no idea. This was just, I don't know, like last when I moved back here, not very long ago. I mean, I went when I was younger, when the church was still there, in fact. And then of course I went when I came back here. And on their website it says people are welcome to visit during daytime hours, because I don't think they can restrict if you're doing which is what I was doing. Obviously if a spirit leads me somewhere, then I'm going to go there, or if I'm doing genealogy research or things like that. um and of course people like us are the least likely to desecrate a grave, or anything as far as
Right.
far as that goes, especially in broad daylight. I was with my daughter, and
This
we were
was like
there.
2009,
Oh
and
wow.
I'm not sure they had a website then, but there was plenty of reviews on Google talking about don't go, they'll arrest you. Don't do this, like you can't go during. And I think there was something about families only. Like if you didn't have a family in the cemetery, you weren't allowed in. So I just didn't try it.
Well, yeah, and I don't recommend it, because that's what I was getting to. I saw this, went there during the day, we were there for a while. I was just walking around, paying my respects, and a sheriff shows up and he said, "What are you doing here? This is private property." And I said, I'm sorry, I was looking for family members," which technically, yes, meaning family uh, of witches, like,
Right.
you know, I don't think I have any direct family, um, but anyways, yes, that's exactly what he said. He said it's private property, and um, but I said something interesting, and I mean, I'm as you know, that people who channel everything, we don't accidentally mean to say anything, especially in that situation. I said I was trying to find a family member that used to be buried here. And he goes, "Used to be? You mean they aren't here anymore?" And I'm like, "Oh, perhaps not." I'm like, "Well, that answers my question then." So,
That is very interesting.
yeah. And my daughter's like, Mom, what did you scared him?" And I mean, and that was a complete channel because I didn't even realize I was saying, it's one of those things
Right.
that something else said. And I was like, "Well, I guess we're done here and I don't need to be here." So that was I've never I had heard about certain people that previously were buried there that were moved and stuff, but um I don't know. I don't think that's what I meant by that. So that was interesting.
That is interesting.
Especially Yeah, especially with the whole werewolf story and stuff that goes along with that one.
There's
Uh,
so much. There's so many things like that, and it's really hard because Topeka actually has a higher crime rate. And I know it's in between Topeka and Lawrence, but Topeka actually has a higher crime rate per capita than Kansas City,
yes.
Missouri. And Kansas City is pretty bad. Like it's bad as far as like I used to live in East Kansas City, East of Truce. I know. Like they don't really talk about it. Like it doesn't get in the news. Like most of the murders
No.
happen there. So it's very hard to verify a lot of the rumors and things you hear in those towns because they don't like talking about it. Oh, we're just a nice small town. Nothing bad happens here.
No, no.
Yeah. So
Kansas,
it gets hard.
I think it has a higher crime rate per capita than some of the bigger like
Yeah.
Atlanta and
Violent
and
crime
it's
rate per
hard to
capita
believe.
specifically. A violent crime rate is higher. Not
Yeah,
like petty crime. Talking about violent crime.
yes. And there's even recently, man, there's been like it'll come across the scanner. They'll be like, "Oh, we saw, so and so burying somebody or digging up somebody in their backyard in Oakland this week." And I'm like,
Yeah, again, like you know,
but you don't hear about it in the news. You hear about it on like
thank
little,
God for the
Facebook
Facebook group,
groups.
right? Facebook group. I'm on a few of those. The Topeka Scanner Radio, the
Yeah.
Idiots and my dudes. The weird
Yeah.
stuff happening, and it's funny because also you have like the hokier stuff about it, like a 666 zip code, six
Yep.
six zip code. That's fun. That's a fun one to tell people.
Well, so a lot of people don't realize the capital. I never knew this either until I moved back here. The capital has the four, well, it used to have the four different buildings on each corner on the outside of it, outside on the blocks. And one was a Masonic lodge, one was a church. I don't know what church it is now or what it used to be, but there was a church and then two other buildings, and they were all connected by the underground tunnels. And everybody used to say that um, created a it wasn't a pentagram. It was yeah. And so one of those buildings, which I just learned of at the 420 festival recently, they they said that it housed the green monster, which they called this, and I had never heard about that. And they said, oh yeah, people don't talk about it because it's like however many demons reside there and everybody. And I'm like, how does nobody know about all these things? And then all the things about managers.
Oh yeah,
Um,
don't get me started on managers. But the funny thing about those tunnels is I actually started having. I was 16. I messed around with some shit I shouldn't have messed around with. Sorry if I'm not supposed to swear on here.
okay.
I bought a divination board and I used like a spirit board and I opened something and didn't know how to close it. And I started studying witchcraft when I was like 11. My mom was always very supportive, but I hadn't done it in a few years. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I messed with some stuff, and it opened something up, and I got something attached to me for a very long time. Pat actually got rid of it a few years ago. She actually got rid of whatever was attached to me off of me. Thank you. But I had sleep paralysis for 6 months straight following this incident.
Oh
Six
my
months
gosh.
straight, and every single night I dreamt of dying. And I had people come to me in this time period. I ended up delirious at the end of it. I was obviously it was horrifying. But talking about, oh, I know you from a past life. This is how you died, and it was the dream I had last night. Like just random. And this isn't Topeka. This is weird. Okay, things happen. But also in these dreams, I was dreaming about tunnels underground, under the Capitol
Yeah.
building, under Topeka High. I didn't go to Topeka High. I found out
Yeah.
here there are tunnels under Topeka High. I lost. I was like, nope, nope. I didn't need to know that because like I was dreaming about these tunnels and things that were there, and I
Yeah.
didn't know they were there. I had no idea about this. I'm like, but yeah,
Yeah, I started getting stories from people anonymously, just by putting that out there that I was doing research on the state hospital, which I'm still doing. But I mean, there were so many, not only from previous employees. I mean, this goes back like doctors and all kinds of patient, everybody from probably like the 60s era on. So some of them are very old now. So I'm trying to kind of, there is a time limit on things like this because a lot of those people that were there when a lot of things began are very old. So that's important. But also other people started coming forward, like I don't know, just people that work security or something. In the tunnels after they tore down the buildings, and that so many things like that bones are found under there, that the same with the Noto art district when they restored that, tearing down a lot of those buildings, people found stuff in the walls and the floorboards. I mean, it is insane, the amount. It's like the entire town has, I don't know, I don't know what it is, but I know there was a lot of um crazy stuff that went on here back in the early 1900s.
yeah. I always
Uh,
wonder if the reason why Kansas is so haunted, like the whole thing, because you have every town, Atchison, Kansas.
oh
Next,
man, I just started that venture last fall, and I'm still.
I have stories. I lived there for a year. My ex-husband is from there, and oh my god, there's so many stories. But it's like the most haunted town in Kansas, right? Well, Holton's like Hotel Josephine, most haunted hotel in Kansas. Fort Scott says they're the most haunted town in Kansas. But like, think about it. Think about the Trail of Tears.
Hmm.
Like
Bleeding
so
Kansas was
so much bloodshed, so much.
another thing that I want to do more research on because I just learned of this recently. Stephen King, somebody pointed out when Big Boy came through, the train that hadn't been in commission since the 40s. I took my kids to see it last summer, actually. So that came through, and then there was the last carnival that came through Topeka, and right when that was at, they changed it to the Stormontville Event Center, and
Not the
I
Expo.
never knew. No, no, it's not the Expo Center anymore. It's the Stormontville Event Center. Um, But it was there. I didn't even realize that the last carnival was filmed, or that was based out of Lawrence, Kansas. The movie, the old movie from, I want to say from like the 70s, which is a creepy movie. And so I started looking into all, and I was like, This is the anniversary of the last carnival, and the last carnival was touring through here, and they might have done that on purpose. I don't know. Um, but then people start talking about how Stephen King's brother um, was a patient at Miniatures, and so he would come and stay in Topeka for a month or so at a time because I started seeing patterns with all his like the pet cemetery at Rochester. Um,
Yes.
what is the other? The train is in one of his. What can I think of it? I've read so many of his books. Um, the train. There's also it. What's the demon that's dressed like a clown?
I don't remember the name of the actual name, the spider demon, whatever. Like I don't remember the actual name if there was one.
I think it's Asmodeus. But anyways, it's interesting that all of those, all of those stories, um, they say were inspired by a lot of his time in Topeka. And I'm
I
like,
I always heard they were inspired by Maine, like him growing up in small town Maine. But
yeah.
if that's the case, I would not be surprised, not one bit, because there's just some weird stuff going on. It's just weird.
And it's not uncommon. I mean, people don't get this. Like when I was on Chasing Prophecy, I'm like, yeah, oh yeah, there's like I don't know how many Topekans, eh, all on the outskirts that encounter werewolves. Like
Oh,
that
oh,
happens all the
oh,
time.
oh, oh my god. Oh my god. I have a story there too. Oh my freaking god. Okay. So my husband, we met in 2000 at Washburn Road Middle School. We've known each other for 22 years. And didn't date until we were adults, but like we hung out, and stuff in high school and everything. And so I lived over off of Villa West, okay? In Villa West. And my mom was driving him home, and he lived in Auburn. And okay, so we're driving.
Auburn is south, right? A
Auburn is
little.
southwest,
Okay.
yeah, of Topeka, and we're driving down Auburn Road in the middle of the night, and we both see this like 7 foot tall, like in front of a cornfield, like not my mom Joe and I all see this thing, okay, 7 feet tall, furry, standing upright,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, did everyone see that? And they're like, yes. And my mom like steps in the gas because she's like freaked out, and she's like, and she and him both look back and see it running behind us on all fours, and I refuse to look. I didn't look. I did not look behind me. I'll take their word for it. But there were three of us in the car who saw that thing, and yeah, definitely outskirts of Topeka, definitely a freaking werewolf type thing.
Yeah.
Type thing. I don't know what it was, but we all saw it. Like, what? Also, another weird one. I was with another friend of mine, Eric, who now lives in California as well, and we saw a Tesla saucer flying over Forbes Field,
Oh yeah. That's like that happens all the time.
and it
That
was like
happens.
low flying, like 20 feet to the car,
Yeah.
and we were coming back from Carbondale on Topeka Boulevard, past Forbes Field. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, right there. Like, what is this? Like,
Yes. I have been I come from I was abducted all my life, especially, um not just in New Mexico. I just didn't remember it until I was older. But yeah, it's happened more in Kansas than anywhere else I've ever lived, I will say. I'm a Chimera, so I have multiple, the multiple organs and the multiple DNA and stuff like that. So um who knows what bloodlines those plus the native background and stuff
right.
that I've got. Um so I think that's why these things have always been normal to me, and people are like, how do you encounter so many cryptids? And it's probably the same with you. And maybe it has to do with the autism and the ADHD and stuff because it's the same with any animal. Think of how like animals are drawn to me. I'm sure they are with you as well.
Yeah.
Most people
Because,
with
I also have a native background. My father was half Lakota,
Yeah.
Don't claim it because I'm obviously very
Yeah.
white. And because by colonizer standards, yes, I am a quarter, so I could pass a blood quantum, but that's colonizer standards. So it's a maternal bloodline, so I'm not native. It's my dad, not my mom. But I do have that his face shape, his eye shape, And actually, it's funny because my first husband from Kansas, he's Crow. He's like half Crow almost, and Absalica tribe. And he pointed out something interesting to me, that he's like, maybe the kids in Kansas could tell that you weren't all white. Like, maybe I know you're redhead, you're white skin, but like maybe that's part of why they bullied you so badly,
Ooh, that's interesting.
because it is a very racist area. Let's be honest. Like,
And I'm the same. Like in my family, my parents, my sister, well, my sister's got like brownish hair, but my parents had pitch black hair. I'm the only like redheaded white girl in the family.
yeah, I'm only redhead white girl. Yeah, like going back generations, there's no redheads. My mother had brown hair and blue eyes. My dad had black hair and almost black eyes
Yeah,
and very dark skin. I don't know how they ended up with me, but here I am.
yeah. I'm the same way. And then myself and my kids, we all got red hair. So
But
um,
I do have a very indigenous bone structure, so it's possible. Also, the autism obviously is another thing. People, they say that we have kind of an uncanny valley effect on neurotypical people. Like, it's sort of like we're human, but we don't act like they do, and there's just enough difference that it
huh,
it sort of creates this like uncanny difference. Like, no matter how and masking isn't healthy anyway, and it's very hard to unmask in a lot of circumstances.
yes,
People are forced to do it in the long term, but once you start learning how to unmask and figuring out who you were before you learned how to mask once, but even if you try for years, like I tried for years to learn how to act neurotypical, and no matter how much I thought I grasped it, I never really did. And there were still just some major differences that caused communication issues, or it could be just communicate differently. And it's funny because amongst other neurodivergents, we have no communication problems. Like, it's just between either way, and they always act like it's a deficit for us, but it's deficit both directions. They can't communicate with us, we can't communicate with them, but we can communicate with each other. Like, we talk just
yeah.
fine. Everyone I work with in Los Angeles is neurodivergent. I feel like it's a city of neurodivergence, honestly. Just part of why I love it here. I mean, think about it. Part of one of the criteria that people look at it now, a modern view of it for autism, is, are rules real? Do rules really exist? I already handed it back to you. Yeah, I did. I did, like, immediately. Close the door. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Do society's rules exist, or are they just made up? And that's one of the big things with
Hmm.
autism, is they're fake. They're all fake. So just, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's faking it, right? And so, um, to have the audacity to even come out to a city like Los Angeles and follow your dreams, that's already a pretty neurodivergent thing to do in the first place, because you're already bucking society's expectations. One, two, everywhere you go in LA, everyone is following a very special interest, a career path, their passion, music, film, makeup, whatever. Most of them have made a career out of something that they are obsessed with, right? And on top of that, go to any bar in Los Angeles, what's the first thing they're going to ask you? What are they going to ask you? They're going to ask you, "Hey, what do you do?
Probably,
What do you do?"
yeah.
There's a script. We have a script to follow in social situations here that everyone just does, and it makes it easier. And so I feel like a lot of people here are undiagnosed, and a lot of people are diagnosed. Like, I have a ton of friends here who are diagnosed, but even more are undiagnosed neurodivergent, just because this city attracts it.
Well, also, I didn't realize this until I was older, obviously. It actually, especially for women due to hormones and such, the older we get, um, the worse the I guess sensory symptoms and
Oh yeah,
triggers become,
absolutely.
because and that's why there's actually m- I would say a large population of women in the 30 to 35 year range, age range, that's when they're first diagnosed.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that definitely is true. It definitely is true. When you get older, it gets harder. Um,
mhm.
but it also, there's a couple other factors that go into that. One is, um, boys are often, especially in the Midwest, more coddled. They aren't held to the same. They always say girls mature faster. No, they don't. No, they don't. Girls don't mature faster. Girls are expected to
Yeah,
mature
I
faster.
agree.
And so we are held to a higher standard from an early age. And we don't really have the luxury of being able to skirt by with, oh, it's just the way I am, like white men can do, white cis men can do. And so I think that's why a lot of girls learn very early on how to mask. And they also present differently, for autistic traits or ADHD traits because of that. More social, can make eye contact, comfortable or not, they do it because they have to. Even the social expectations around, like, you have to hug your family members, you have to do this, it's like we are trained early on to sort of people please, and that
Mhm.
led to that. But another thing on top of the sensory issues is you can only go so long in your life, um, being autistic in a neurotypical world and trying to push yourself into that mold before you reach
Yeah,
burnout. And autistic
yeah,
burnout is different from professional burnout. It's different from like depression. It's different from, it can get misdiagnosed a lot. A lot of women who are autistic get misdiagnosed with borderline, you know, and things like that. But people get diagnosed in their early 30s because you've been working for 10 plus years, you
yeah.
know, masking, you're tired, and a lot of people never recover. It takes years. I
Mhm.
first reached burnout on a long-term scale after my first business failed, and I had to shut down, and it took me a good year. And the pandemic, horrible, but it was a godsend for me to recuperate and rebuild, and gave me the chance to kind of slow down and really like learn about myself and to unmask and then to save money and not go out, and not have to do everything and just go. Because another thing about LA, all the positives, negatives, time, I swear to God, moves faster here. It really does. If I'm
I
visiting,
think it moves faster as we get older in general.
it does.
Like, I feel that way.
It does,
It's
but I
like
travel back and forth across the country fairly frequently. In places like Texas, it just feels like it drags on forever. Like a day just lasts 3 times as long.
yeah.
In the Midwest and like Louisiana and that central time zone, for some reason, that feels normal. LA feels fast. It literally feels like time is just like speeding through. And yeah, of course, you do lose time to
Right.
traffic and the fact that everyone is like racing to the top and trying to get ahead, and there's so much to do, and there's so that definitely contributes. But I've talked to a lot of people who moved from other places because most people
Mhm.
implants, they with transplants, they I always say that everybody belongs in LA because nobody belongs here, um everyone agrees though. Like everyone agrees, oh yeah, time moves faster.
I felt that way in New York as
Oh,
well. Well, to an extent, only in the city area, and then when I lived upstate, it was like Kansas because it snowed, over our heads and nobody could go anywhere all winter. So it seemed like it went really slow then. But in the cities, yes, absolutely, it felt like it went by really, really fast. The same with like Florida area. So I'm wondering if I thought about doing a study on this. Aside from one, I had this epiphany the other one of those shower theories you you get. um, of do you think people that travel, pilots, commercial pilots, maybe that go across the, like even the international date line or across the country frequently, or people that travel a lot, um, even people that commute, I mean, a significant different or distance, like 100 miles a day or something, one way. Do you think that it affects in some way biologically their aging?
I don't know. I've never thought about that.
Because it's kind of like a form of time. I mean, it literally is time travel. Because say you go from, LA to Japan.
Hmm.
Well, you're going from almost the furthest west, um, in North America to literally the furthest eastern location in the world. So, and it would be the next day. So I'm wondering how, and then if it would be kind of similar to like astronauts, how they, I don't know, I just have these weird,
No,
weird.
it's definitely interesting. I haven't thought about that. I mean, time travel thing, yeah. I mean, time I think is a construct anyway. Like
I
we
do too.
perceive it because we're literally decaying organic matter. Like we perceive it because we are moving closer to death. And we measure it because we can, and it's flawed. The measurement, obviously, it's relative. Thank you, Einstein. But
Yes.
um, I think
But
I
in
feel
that aspect, as in time, I mean time of, because that would affect you because of where the sun and the moon are located,
right.
you know.
Well, we see with astrology how much of a difference it makes when you have like your exact birthplace and time in there, how specific it can get, you know. Obviously where you are affects you for many reasons. But I don't really think about time in that sort of concrete way, because I do feel like, I mean, I don't know, I have so many past life memories, and you know, they say that that can overlap.
Oh,
You know,
I do as well.
I
And even in a normal day, and I've talked to so many people, I'm sure this happens to you as well, if you're that aware of those other lives and different, that there'll be many times I feel like I'm living in multiple timelines in one day. You experience those.
right. Well,
And
there's constantly shifting. Like I feel
mhm.
like I every other day I notice something else that has like a Mandela effect that I'm like I know for sure was a thing. Um, but I just kind of just ignore it. Like I at this point I'm sort of just focused on aligning myself with whatever timeline has
Yes.
my my best life. I'm out here trying to live my best life. So if that means skipping timelines, some of my childhood memories are incorrect now, so be it, I guess. Like I've kind of reached a point of acceptance. One of the ones that really, really messed with me was Annie. Annie. So Shirley
Like the
Temple.
musical Annie?
Shirley Temple.
Oh
Shirley
yeah.
Temple was not a redhead. She was blonde.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, and I guess you could use the excuse that, well, it's black and white and people didn't
Mhm.
know, but also she never played Little Orphan Annie. She never played Little Orphan Annie ever. She
Hmm.
played in a different movie about a little girl who was an orphan. Very similar story, but it wasn't Annie. But I swear, as a child, because there were so many old people. My grandmother was part of the silent generation. She was born in 1918. My mother was born in 1950. We have very long generations in my family. I was born in 1987. Okay. People from my grandmother's generation were always around me when I was a small child, curly red hair. And they're like, oh, you look like Little Orphan Annie. You look Shirley Temple. And they'd say it both together. Both.
Huh.
And I'm just like, I swear to God, I saw a movie when I was a very small child that had Shirley Temple playing Annie, and it was called Annie. And I swear to God, she had red hair. But in this timeline, for good or for bad, she did not.
No, I swear Annie had red
Yeah,
hair
look
too.
it up.
Or I mean, I swear Shirley. See, I just did it
Yeah,
too. I swear Shirley Temple had red hair.
look it up. I was
Because
mad.
as redheads, like, you pay attention to that.
Right,
Because
exactly.
I know Red Sonja, The Little Mermaid,
Hmm.
Pippi Longstocking,
Yep.
and Shirley Temple. Oh, and Judy Garland.
Yes, and should have gone. I went as Pippi Longstocking when I was 6 years old. My grandma put pipe cleaners in my braids. They actually stuck out.
Yep.
Great.
That's funny. But that's what I mean. That there's very few of us that, but like you remember that as a child because specifically, like those were the people at the time. I probably thought that only like five other redheads existed in the world
Well,
because
it
we're.
is same hair. And it's hard to tell now because dyed hair exists and it's gotten really good.
Mhm.
But like my mother used to tell me, here's an autism moment. She's like, if someone could bottle your hair and sell it, they'd make $1 million. And so I was like literally scared someone was gonna cut off my hair and put it in a bottle.
Oh my goodness, I have so many stories of and I've always, well, for the most part, I did shave my head at one point. I mean, almost completely, but um, yeah, I did too. People would come up and like nowadays that somebody would probably call the cops or consider it like I
Right.
don't know, assault or something. But there would be like older people that would literally grab my ponytail, be like, hey, so and so, that'd be telling their wife or husband or whatever to come look at and not even paying attention that like it's attached to my head, like it was a weird thing. And I think only other redheads can relate to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Because,
I have a fun story too about that. I was at Mardi Gras when I was like 3, and Pete Fountain, famous jazz clarinetist, came up to me and my grandma, and he handed me a doubloon with his face on it. He was playing clarinet. He stopped marching in the parade, and he said, "She has the same color hair I had when I had hair."
Oh,
And actually, that's why I chose to play clarinet in middle school, because of him. But he died.
really? I played the clarinet too. I didn't know that about him though.
Yeah, yeah, Pete Fountain, and he died a few years ago, sadly. But he was a brilliant, brilliant jazz clarinetist, absolutely brilliant. And it seems
Well,
like we have a lot in common. It's very serendipitous. Our entire
I know that's what I was saying. That's I typically interview people that um I've been intuitively led to and I always learn something so profound and something so do you speak on autism um
only on
to
TikTok, only on TikTok, and only to my kids' schools.
you
Uh,
should consider doing it because there's I'm sure you've helped me. I'm sure um there's so many other women out there and men obviously that probably never knew half of the just world of wealth of knowledge you know um I do wish you were coming to Kansas. I mean, I plan on moving hopefully, so
I will be, I will be coming through there at some point in the next few months, so I'll definitely reach out. Um, I usually go after New Orleans. I'm not this year because we're going to Romania shortly afterwards. We usually just cut up north and then go over, because then we see family for a bit and then come back. But I forget which trip I'm taking, but there's somewhere I have to go. Oh, Indianapolis. We're going to Gen Con. So we have
okay.
to go straight through. So that's early August. So
Yeah, that and so I was in the ironic thing is I was in I won this everything happens for a reason. So I won this Miss Kansas thing for a scholarship, which back then I wasn't the typical pageant girl. I wasn't. It was something that I did for a scholarship. Never thought I would be good enough to win, and I answered, the question in the Kansas competition, the question they ask everyone at the end. I was the only one that answered differently than all the other girls, and when I went back, and everybody's like, yeah, I think even my friends and parents are like, why would you answer that? I'm like, why do I need to be like everybody? You know what I mean? But I ended up winning it. And one of the things was they sent you to Hollywood. And so that was the first time I'd ever been there. And so it was 20 years ago. I got to go to Hollywood. They sent us they made a video of us like singing and skipping through the through the castle gates and like on the teacups and stuff. And totally not. I was like I had to buy new clothes that weren't all black and all kinds of stuff for that trip. But that was my first time in Holland and the last time I was there, honestly. Um, but I was like starstruck coming from Kansas, not just that. It seemed like another world.
it is.
Um,
Culture shock is real.
yeah. Um, and not just the culture because we weren't around people that much, aside from like we had our whole pageant and stuff there. But I don't the entire energy, the entire everything feels different than any place I've ever been actually. So,
I never pictured myself moving here or living here. I never did. I never pictured myself working in Hollywood. I this was not what I planned for myself, but I'm so grateful, and it's obviously where I'm supposed to be, because every time I consider moving, something else happens, and it's like, nope, here's another opportunity. You got to do this here. You got to be here for this, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm supposed to be here. So, and it's funny because my grandmother was born in Columbus, Kansas. You know,
oh
West Middle
wow,
Kansas, where the
there's nothing.
big big bird, the giant steamroller, whatever it's called, the giant, like, shovel thing.
Well, I know they have the world's largest prairie dog,
Not
ground
that, but
groundhog.
it's the very far southeast corner of Kansas, and she was born there in 1918. The year of the Great War ended. Lived through Dust Bowl era Kansas. Grew up on a farm. 7 siblings, and she went to college at St. Mary's, and then she taught school in a 1-room schoolhouse. And
Wow.
she taught school in a 1-room schoolhouse in Kansas and saved up money. And where did she go? She went to Hollywood.
Probably, yeah.
She went to Hollywood, and she worked as a model here in the 1940s.
Wow. That's
And
amazing.
yeah, and and she actually dated Raymond Burr for a while before he was Perry Mason, long before he was ever openly gay, if he ever was. She actually did a lot. She was kind of a beard, had many gay boyfriends. But and then she moved after about 10 years in LA after the war, and things kind of changed in World War II. She moved to Chicago in like 1950 and met my grandfather, who was a pharmacist, and they got married, had my mother. She was born in Springfield, Illinois, and then they moved to New Orleans 2 months later so we'd go to college at Tulane. And that's how I ended up being in New Orleans, because they moved to New Orleans and I grew up there.
Wow. And I guess I cannot uh, most people probably don't realize how bold of a move that was for your grandmother during that period, because people don't people don't leave here. Like you said, they're expected, especially with that whole outdated mentality of you're supposed to stay here and work on the farm or do whatever in
Yeah.
the area you're from for the rest of your life and for the rest of your kids' lives and their kids and every generation. So for her to do that was very, very bold. I mean, very amazing.
And none of her siblings did. One of her brothers moved to Washington State. Everyone else was still in Kansas.
Yeah.
It's funny, my cousins on my grandmother's sister's grandchild. um, and my grandmother died in 2008, but her sister is still alive. She's 106 years old, lives in Olathe.
Wow.
Her grandson, one of her, Kyle Johnson, he's a famous artist, works for the Getty Museum. He just bought a whole bunch of land in Shandon, California, but he's lived in LA for a long time. So it's weird how that kind of like that lineage has that connection. And then after May 8th, 1995, we had a big flood in New Orleans, and it was just rainfall. It wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't hurricane season. Now hurricane season starts in May, but didn't
Yeah.
then. And 18 inches of rainfall in 6 hours. And my grandmother lived through Hurricane Betsy. It blew the roof off her house. Um, she
Wait,
lived through
it was called Hurricane what?
Hurricane Betsy in 1965. It was the
I thought you
largest.
said Bessie. I was like, "Oh, that
No,
was my grandmother's name."
Betsy. No, it was the largest hurricane to make landfall before Katrina. Um, in Louisiana, it so much damage, and the levees also broke in Betsy as well. And it's funny enough, people said the same time back then. They said, "Oh, they were bombed." They said the same thing after Katrina, but my grandma was just done. She was just tired. She was tired of the floods. She was tired of the heat. She was tired of it. And she's like, she was scared to let me out of the house because the crime rate was so high. Even in Metairie where I lived, it was
Mhm.
just like there was a guy who got shot 3 times in his stomach in the room above me while I was sleeping because he went to check his car alarm and turn it off because the car alarm went off. Like it was just, and it's still a problem. The crime rate is still really high. But um, so we moved back to Kansas. Well, I moved to Kansas the first time, but she moved back there to Topeka because the sister closest in age to her was living in Topeka and had been for the last 50 years or whatever. So that's how I ended up there.
That's how I ended up here. Because my family still lives here, and they won't move anywhere.
Yeah, my mom's there. Mom is there. She's at um assisted living facility there. She was a medical librarian at Stormont Vale for like 20 something years
Oh, wow.
and
Huh.
retired. She's, yeah.
Well, Rachel, we've talked for 2 hours, and it's been
Yeah,
amazing. It's been such a pleasure having you. Where can people find, your makeup line, your website, everything you have going right now?
yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate it. NewOrleansSwampWitch.com is my personal website. Vampire with a Y, VAMPYRE, magazine.com, and also vampirecosmetics.com, same thing with the Y. spelling also Alchemy Mythosis.com and MythosisManufacturing.com.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Check her out. She has amazing products, and obviously there's it sounds like there's so many good things coming for you, and I hope um all of those. I'm gonna have to check into the. I'm gonna have to talk to you about wholesale stuff here.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but we are. Thank you to all of my listeners. Thank you for joining. I will also post the links and tune in next week at the same time for the missing piece. Good night, everyone, and be safe out there. If I can find out how to